Okay, Eddie, everyone's been waiting for this episode.
Hello, Heather.
Oh
Thank you
my
for having
gosh.
me.
Yeah. I have to tell everyone the story of how I found you, how you magically entered my life. So, uh, in the summer, a client of mine who comes to my cottage retreat intensives, she's been in my world for a little bit. She comes and does all the food. She's the chef, on site chef. And I watched her personality and her energy change over time, over a few month period, because she met you. So this type of individual, and if she's listening to this, she'll hear it. She's probably going to listen. Um, would probably identify as someone who's type A, very good girl, doing all the things that she's supposed to do, air quotes, to get the results that she wants. And from one of her healthcare practitioners, she was experiencing some physical symptoms. Her healthcare practitioner suggested that she do a psychedelic psilocybin experience and then enter Eddy. I had absolutely no intention of leaning into this. I identify as a rebel, but I also identify as somebody who doesn't do things just because it's trendy. But I hold a lot of energy for people. I hold a lot of space for people. Maybe not energy. I hold a lot of space for people. And I'm not in a crisis state in my life. Things are actually going great. But there was a seed that was planted, and just watching her change and her look lighter and I was watching the trajectory of her life just slowly shift. Every time I was in my journal, I was like, there's something here. It's not going away. And I truly believe that if I keep thinking about something, or we keep thinking about something, it's like a breadcrumb, and we need to like lean in and follow that. So that's where I experienced not one, but two ceremonies with you. The first one was a solo ceremony. The second one, my husband joined in a group, which I never thought that was going to happen either. So, Eddy, just by being you and stepping up and into your light and your gifts, you're making a really big impact. And I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
I feel like you may have briefly, and I'm curious who it is. You may have told me, but we'll discuss that after. But
Mm-hmm.
that's great to hear. I hear a lot of stories like that. There's one thing that stood out. You talked about trendy right now. It is quite trendy,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lot of psychedelic research going very mainstream. Um, Podcasts. Michael Pollan also just not only written a book, but also did a whole documentary on Netflix, How to Change Your Mind. I got into psychedelics way before the mainstream third wave, I would call it. Um, Maybe about 15 years ago. The hustle culture that you talked about, I was in the hustle culture at a very young age, actually. I opened my first restaurant when I was 19. I
Mm-hmm.
grew up in the restaurant industry, working for my aunts as a dishwasher, a busboy, a server, a cook. So I did all the positions. And after high school, my aunt planted a seed, and she said, "Eddie, you have a gift." I definitely helped her open her restaurant. Quite a creative mind. I think that's where my gift lies. Attention to detail, very connected to all the senses with taste and smell and touch, textures. I'm just really connected to the senses, and similar to that seed that was planted in you of that psychedelic exploration, I had that seed within me to open my own restaurant, and it was very fruitful. I learned a lot about myself. I created a lot of abundance and wealth for myself. But for a good decade, I ran my health mentally, emotionally down to the ground. And because I was so busy, I didn't really have a healthy outlet. I didn't have a healthy practice. I wasn't in the wellness world, just in business and restaurant duties. So the combination of the stress and the lack of self-care got me to a point where I needed an outlet, and I started to party quite hard. So a few years down the road, the abundance that I created with the restaurant, I used that money to open a nightclub. And that's actually when I came out as well. So I came out as a gay man when I was 22, and in my small uh, town of London, Ontario, there wasn't a space that I felt comfortable in. So I decided I'm going to open my own. So I doubled down on business and added even more stress into my life. But then I also partied really hard as well. And that was my outlet, and it was fun. There were absolutely no regrets. And some of the best experiences that I had was was partying, was just celebrating and dancing, and that also involved a lot of alcohol as well, and some recreational drugs, and the combination, the stacking, and I was doing well. I was doing fine, and I think it was maybe 3 or 4 years in when I started to notice that I couldn't keep up with that lifestyle anymore. I feel like because I was using recreational drugs so often, my neurotransmitters they started to deplete. Like it wasn't doing the same and giving the same effect. And I remember coming to Toronto and partying one time, and I was trying to get that same high, that same feeling of excitement, of like openness and love and social connection, but I couldn't get it, and I kept stacking. And I found myself completely depleted. I felt nothing. Lost my keys in Toronto. It was the middle of winter time, and my friends disappeared, and I was just here alone in Toronto, stuck outside, um, freezing cold, no coat, no keys, and I just had a moment of like, what am I doing? If I keep walking this path, doing the same thing, I'm gonna get myself into some deep trouble mentally, emotionally. And that was really my like low point, dark night of the soul. And when I was able to get back into my car and drive back home, I had a good like 3 hours just to really reflect on my life, and decided I need to make some really big changes. And that's when I set the intention to sell my restaurant, which is sold to family members now. They're still running it and continue to expand it. I sold my nightclub. I also own the building that the nightclub was in. I sold that as well, which allowed a lot of space and freedom for me to explore myself. So I took a sabbatical, and didn't actually even plan on taking the sabbatical. It was actually my brother who was the big catalyst. He had a tragedy. He was living in Toronto, and he fell to his death in a horrific accident. And that's when I decided I really need to take a step back, because I had to not only grieve him, however, it brought up so much of my stuff that I suppressed. And the reason why I suppressed all the heavy, darker emotions was because that I needed to be that rock and foundation for my family, for the people who worked for me in my businesses, and just continue moving forward because they didn't needed a leader. However, I neglected myself, my self care. I pushed and suppressed the emotions that were, starting to bottle up and need to really come out. And I didn't really have an outlet. Dancing and having fun was my outlet, and that chapter closed. So I took a long break from just life completely. And there was a podcast, or it was a book. I can't remember where it was, but Tim Ferriss was involved as well. Tim Ferriss is in Silicon Valley, and he talked about psychedelics in a therapeutic way. Just really dropped seeds and hints of it. And that's when it piqued my curiosity on the advantages of using psychedelics to help to rewire the brain, to help access different parts of ourselves that's been shut off, and to soften just the regular way that we think, and allow things to come up to the surface to get released. So that's when I started to dabble into psychedelics. And at that point, it was so hard to come by. Um, I'll say this now openly, but uh, nowadays you can get it online. Go to the streets of Toronto to get it. It's so, even though it's still illegal, it's very out there and common. But back in the day, I had to go in the dark web, um, get Bitcoin, tumble the Bitcoin, and access them because I was so desperate
Wow.
for change.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was able to access them, and I started to just do a lot of research and microdose. So it started with microdosing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went eventually down south to Peru to work with ayahuasca, which is another form of psychedelic similar to psilocybin. And that's when I got really deep into psychedelic work in a very ceremonial fashion, therapeutic fashion. And I was down in the jungle for a good half a year, just exploring, doing the work. And then one of the facilities that I ended up journeying at invited me to train as a facilitator. Just because before I landed in the jungle, I was staying at temples in Thailand and Laos and Bali. So yoga teacher training, a lot of meditation, Vipassana retreats, silent retreats, fasting retreats. So I picked up all these tools along the way leading up to the jungle. And when I actually journeyed with the medicine, because I was so prepared, they also noticed that I had all these skill sets that I could provide. So I got the logistical training from the center, and then I ended up working there for a good 6 months. I had a year contract, but I had to end it early just because it is emotionally heavy, and at that point, I was still learning to detach myself from other people and to create my energetic boundaries. And I wasn't really taught that working down south. It was more so just the pragmatic, logistical way of facilitating, bringing people into the jungle, orientation. But then under psychedelics, or actually when people open themselves up, like there's all these feelings and emotions, and I got entangled into a lot of them. So I had to extract myself, and I took a good 2 years off, completely off psychedelics, and went deep into just meditation, to ground, to integrate, because that was the piece that was missing, that I didn't really know about. And because down south they do ayahuasca, and they some of the retreats I did was like 3 weeks intensive, and it was just every 3 days. And
Wow.
um, yeah, so I'll stop there if you have any questions. I kind of went on a long spree there.
Yeah. Well, I like listening to you. Number one, just hearing your journey, all I hear and see is like the craft, right? Like the journey of the craft and the desire. And although our paths are very different, it's, there's something that you grab onto and you're just like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to figure this out. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? And when I'm in your presence, or like with the first time I came to you, and this is what, and I will tell people this publicly, I was actively seeking a teacher or a guide that could hold space for me and that actually didn't know who I was. Like you didn't know the Heather Chauvin, you didn't listen to the podcast because, and immediately I was like, okay, I trust you. We had a quick little Zoom chat. And then after our like one-on-one private, I was like, you held space beautifully and I felt safe to just let go and let it out. Um, and that's a craft, that's an art, that's not something you can learn in a weekend course. That is like a commitment to a journey of becoming. So number one, thank you. um and you were talking about, well, we talked about this previously, like the dark night of the soul and this journey of becoming. I think everyone listening to this episode or this podcast in general is on this freedom journey, and whatever brings them to it. It could be a death in the family, it could be a relationship. A lot of the women I attract are raising children, and sometimes it's their children's behavior that triggers something in them that forces them to grow. It could be your health, your body shutting down. Um, and I've had many dark nights of the soul in my journey. Um, and something else that you said is oftentimes what I find is, when we're strong and ambitious and doing the things, we're actually taking away from other people's dark night of the soul. Like you were talking about that moment you had where you're like lost your keys and you're in Toronto. We need to experience those things. So I'm curious if you can, we'll talk about psilocybin psychedelics in a second, but let's talk about that for a moment, because sometimes I don't think people realize that they are like skirting around their dark night of the soul moment, or they feel it but they're not going through it. So what is your relationship to that, and where do you see people really gaining that freedom journey when it comes to hitting their quote unquote rock bottom?
Hmm. I think the title of your podcast, Emotionally Uncomfortable, I'm very good at that. And I can see points in my life as well that I've actively decided to go into a discomfort knowing the outcome because I wanted to learn something about myself. I didn't want that feeling to linger and take control of me. Um, a specific one is or was in relationships. I knew I had a part of me that was anxious when I became close to someone, and I would get jealous. And there was this one particular person I knew that it would not work out, and I
Mm-hmm.
knew that I would get hurt. And he even vocalized that, no, we're not. This is nothing, but we can continue going through this. And I decided to. I remember, and I can only remember when I look back, reflect of why did I do that? And when I had that conversation deep within, it's because I wanted to confront my feelings of jealousy head on, my anxiousness head on. I wanted to know how it felt like to lose someone that you like lusted and loved, and also to show myself that I can get through these emotions, and become lighter and not so held back by these emotions. And it's similar to a psychedelic journey as well. You never know what you're going to uncover, and oftentimes it's a lot of discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
However, the way out is through. If we kind of dance around the edges, those inner demons will dance with you, and they'll always kind of be there. But if you confront them head on, that energy tends to dissolve on its own. What used to be scary or fearful um, is no longer. And also, you get to experience the polarity as well. So when you go deep into fear, you get to experience the spectrum and the opposite, which is like love, love and lightness. And um, I feel like many people don't get to experience the fullest capacity of what love feels like, because they're afraid to experience the fear. But if
Mm-hmm.
you are able to hold polarities and be with both polarities, because they're always going to come in and out,
Yeah.
you get to enjoy the spectrum of both emotions. However, if we're kind of lukewarm, you'll kind of stay in that um, state. And I guess that's the best way to describe it. It's always hard talking about like energy and emotions because it's you feel it, and I'm not sure how to word it, but I feel like maybe you and maybe the audience will understand what I'm trying to say.
100%. I mean, this
Yeah,
is my jam.
yeah,
And like when you're, yeah, it's like trying to put words to an inner experience.
hmm,
And I'm always talking about managing energy. And um I think that's the beauty of the human experience is when you're in circle with people or you're having these conversations, you can describe it. They're like, yeah, I get that. I feel that too. Um Emotionally Uncomfortable, the actual title. So my podcast used to be called something else like 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And emotionally uncomfortable is the duality of you need to feel the emotional discomfort. I don't believe in hard things. I actually feel like the personal development world that's like, we can do hard things is very triggering for me because I used to be addicted to hard. And I think when we're
Mm-hmm.
addicted to hard, we're somewhat addicted to suffering, but there is the emotional discomfort that you need to feel in order to go through. But that said, it's also incredibly emotionally uncomfortable to feel and experience joy, like to feel really, really good when there's so much suffering in the world, to say, I'm having a really good day, or to hold space in your, and we talked, well, you briefly touched on it, like the energetic boundaries, to be like, I'm feeling great while someone else is, feeling suffer, like when they're in their emotional state, you not taking that on. And so all of this is emotionally uncomfortable, but I truly believe when we become, right, who we desire to be, and we learn those boundaries, this is true leadership, because you're possibility for people. You're like, look, the world is on fire, everybody's losing their shit, and look what you're doing. You are giving hope to people that there is another way, that you can rise above, that you can still become, that you can still succeed. And I think that's why I was attracted to you as well, because that's what I feel you embody, is possibility and hope. There was something that you just said. Oh, we were talking about the dark night of the soul. Oh, facing it head on. So I was terrified, absolutely terrified. I feel like the duality of being somebody who is a leader, strong, ambitious, holds it all, has to hold strong boundaries for other people. My fear, what the first time, was just the unknown, but I had to be very careful that I wasn't taking on other people's stories. Because even in this world of psychedelics and, oh, what if I have a bad trip? What if I have this? What if I have that? I could see the projection of how other people live their life, like how other people live in fear and would never have the courage to do something like that. And I thought, man, I've been to hell and back. I've done some like really emotionally uncomfortable things. How can this be that bad? And the first time I was just so scared of the unknown. And then once I did it, I felt so free. Like it actually makes me emotional, because there was a part of me that met. So I also did it at the end of 3 marathons in 3 days. Remember?
Me too.
I did my endurance event, and it was like 3 days later. I was like, that was a hell of a week. But it did something to me where it was like I met this version of myself that I made really, really proud. And it just healed a part of myself that I couldn't have done, writing in a journal or breath work or meditating. Like I really challenged myself to go the extra mile, which scared the shit out of me, but it brought a part of myself back home.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's like it opened another emotional door, where before I could say, everyone's like, aren't you proud of all your accomplishments? And I'm like, yeah. Where now I'm like, yes. And I can actually feel the gratitude for myself, not seeking it from anybody else.
That's one thing I hear often. Gratitude, compassion, self-love. There's a deeper felt sense coming out of the journey, and even weeks out of the journey as well. Because sometimes we can intellectualize it and we think we know the full capacity of it, but psychedelics, it gets us into the emotional body, and those feelings of gratitude and compassion is heightened and magnified so much, to the point where we feel connected to like everyone and the earth, and
Mhm.
there's just a deep sense of like we're all in this together. And I hear that quite often as well. And I also like what you talked about, like just opening a door. I often describe to someone new going into psychedelics how it feels is like you're going through, you're entering a hallway similar to like a hotel room, and there's many doors to open, and those doors are pockets into your unconscious parts of yourself. And when you go into the experiences, you get to open the door to see what's behind the door. And it could be creativity, it could be inspiration, it could be a bit of darkness, past traumas. However, as we open these doors, we illuminate all the gifts, including the past, traumas, because once they're illuminated, they don't have a strong hold on us anymore. And we have more access. We become more conscious of our fullest capacity to move forward in life with new thoughts and ideas and perspectives about ourselves, about how we see the world. So that's like one of the ways that the metaphors I like to describe, in case anyone's wondering, how does it feel to go in, into yourself? And that's how I describe it.
It's a wild ride. I felt like I won't get into my like moment by moment, but both were very different experiences for me. The second one was very physical in the sense that my body was releasing a lot. I was very uncomfortable in my body, but I also felt safe in my body. And I, in my experience of observing in a group and then privately, the fears that I hear people say about like going to the darkness and like having a bad trip, like people being afraid of that. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because there could be different types of psychedelics. Like I know, yeah. Can you talk a little bit about
Absolutely.
that? Because I will say at the beginning, you were talking about the you had two different mushrooms and they kind of gave you two different feelings. What I
Mm-hmm.
heard you say was one was more masculine and one was more feminine.
Okay.
Me being who I am, which one do you think I wanted to do?
Likely the more masculine one.
Yep.
Yeah. Yes.
And I trusted your
Mm-hmm.
guidance and you were
Mm-hmm.
like, nope, we're not doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, this is going to be too soft. I'm not going to get what I needed.
Mm-hmm.
And what I actually needed was the feminine.
Yes.
And obviously I trust the teacher, I trust the guide.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that too is what I'm teaching people is
Mm-hmm.
that what we perceive masculine to be is within the feminine as well. But most of us need the healing work. So anyways, I'll let you talk about
For
that.
sure. Yeah, let's go back to, you asked about the bad trip. So bad trips can and potentially will happen. I don't like to label bad trips as bad trips. The only bad trip is if there's lack of safety physically, lack of groundedness within the facilitator, and not being able to hold the space in the container in a grounded, stable way. Because once you go into the experience, there's going to be discomfort and breakthroughs along with euphoric feelings and bliss and joy. You're going to experience whatever you need to experience. And a bad trip can be softened if you go in with a lot of preparation. So, as you know, before you journey, there's a workbook, and I teach people and give people so many tools on how to go in with these tools and how to navigate through trust, through breath, through visualization. And that's what's going to help people move through the journey as gracefully as possible. Of course, it's going to be challenging. I don't like to beat around the bush, but that's part of the journey. And when you come out of it, there's so much more empowerment and resilience that you feel mentally, emotionally, and physically because you went through the bad trip or like the discomfort. There's a lot of value in going through the mud and then blossoming just like a lily. So many people do come in with fears. However, I've gone through so many experiences personally and have guided so many people over the 5 years on my own, and also journeying so much with all sorts of psychedelics. I've experienced the full spectrum of emotions. So wherever people are at, no matter how difficult it is, I can sense where they're at and I can be there with them. And just that knowing that Eddy's there energetically with me, if needed, just sensing into that, it can help people get through it. And I wouldn't be able to do what I do if I didn't go through all these experiences to feel the full spectrum, because I have so much confidence that that person's going to move through what they need to move through in the correct timing and come out more, resilient, stronger, more open, and more conscious and aware within themselves. So there's a level of confidence and groundedness that I hold in my space, and I'm sure you felt it. And that's why so many people who come to me, 50% of them have never done psychedelics before. And they either heard through a friend or found through my website, because it's quite a vulnerable thing to go in to a stranger's space and be held when you're in a completely altered state, when you've lost control. Um, And I think I'm able to do it just because of the experience and my willingness to be with all the parts of myself, and because I can hold myself, I can hold others if they need, and also not to save either. I like to allow people to be with themselves, and only support them when they really need, because there's a lot of power in empowering ourselves to be grounded and secure, and trust that we can get through any of it.
Mm-hmm. And I will say, I think that's why I respect that in you as a facilitator, as a healer, teacher, because you can tell, like, when someone can energetically be like, you can throw anything at me. I've seen it all. I've personally experienced it all. I got you. And that I hear from, so I don't drink. I don't do any of that stuff. If anyone knows me, they're like, I'm surprised you do this. You've never been into that ever. Um, Psychedelics, any really altered state was not my drug of choice. Sleep was my drug of choice. Like, my body would just shut down as a kid, as a teenager. And it is fascinating to me to hear people go, oh, I've done that. I've done that. And I'm like, the power of intention, the power of the invisible, the power of like being held in that space is beyond words. And I didn't actually understand the value of that until I experienced it with you. And you even just communicating that around like, being able to hold that energy within yourself kind of circles back, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that too, because I talk a lot about this on the podcast about energetic boundaries, how you can hold for people who are like, how do you do that? What is that? Hold your energy, because people are always like, I'm just taking on the energy of my environment. How do you hold the energy of confidence, of steady, rock solid groundedness when there can be other energies around you experiencing chaos and overwhelm and deep, deep healing? So, anything you want to talk about with energetic boundaries with your journey?
Absolutely. There's a few tools that I've developed over time myself, and it's gotten to a point where it's kind of just autonomic now. I don't really think about it. It's just a deep knowing that I know it's mine, I know it's not mine, and that's it. And the awareness is there. But as I was developing this energetic boundary, I would do visualization. Visualization is very important because visualization is what releases different neurochemicals, serotonin, norepinephrine, GABA. It's all the feeling that releases these neurotransmitters. So I would visualize, and I do this in my meditations before the journey begins, is planting a golden seed with strong boundaries and protection, energetic protection, the pit of the belly. And I get people to breathe it out to inform like just a golden bubble around their body, their aura. So that's one of the ways. The other way is I use my breath, and if I feel tension on my body or some discomfort, I use my breath very consciously to just move it through, move it out. And I always form, it's always a golden bubble. I don't know why, but it just works for me. Um, and also because innately I have been working on my confidence. I have been working on my foundation physically, mentally, emotionally. It's the daily rituals that I do for myself. I do quite a bit of breath work. I meditate every morning. I go for walks. I'm very mindful of all the thoughts that's running through my head, and very in touch with the subtle emotions and energy in my body. And I can auto correct, and it's become autonomic to the point where I don't really have to think about it. I just push it through. I move it through, and I don't even ask if it's mine or the others, because it doesn't even really matter. Because even if it's the other energy, if it's triggering something within myself, then that's my own wounding. So I know it's still my responsibility, even though that person might be activating for me. It's my responsibility. Um, so
I
those,
I
yeah,
was
go
going to
ahead.
say I can understand what you're saying.
Hmm.
I too experience it. I have this weird visual, and I tell people all the time, pretend you have a platter
Hmm.
and the other person has a platter, and you can have a conversation with somebody. Like, I could be talking to my children or talking to my husband or someone else, and the way that they're talking, I can feel my body reacting, like I'm
Hmm.
being triggered. Like, just visualize a platter, like you're holding a platter and their energy is falling on your platter, and you just fling it back to them, or like you're just handing it back to them, like you're visualizing it real time. Like, oh, wow, I was completely energized. And then I'm walking down the street and I meet this neighbor, and they start this conversation with me. And it was like they were puking their stuff on me.
Hmm.
And somehow I just let them. And I'm like, no, this isn't mine. Hey, here you go. Have it back. Here you go. Have it back. And so it's like you have to actively do these things. But if you're not living an intentional, conscious life, like you don't, it doesn't really take up more. Let's talk about this a little bit. It doesn't really
Hmm.
take up more time. It's that you don't have the mental capacity. You're not even thinking about these things. It's an identity shift of how you're leading and living your life. Did you start to do you ever notice that? I'm assuming you're constantly evolving your identity, but do you remember like the first time you found that, where you were like, "Oh my gosh, the mental energy output to like consciously be a different person," versus what you're saying now where you're like, "Oh, it's just automatic."
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, in the beginning, there's a conscious effort on what you decide to internally give your energy and attention to. And it could be, um, for example, you use, the example of someone, spilling, uh, just emotionally dumping on us, right? If we weren't aware of that thought of, oh, this person just dumped on me and he irritated me. And if that's the energy we're giving to ourselves, even after that incident, it's going to keep amplifying. However, when that happens, we can switch the narrative. Like you said, oh, I'm just going to pour it back out, to them. For me, I also use the elements as well. If I go for a walk, or I don't even have to, I have a big live wall, which is very meditative as well, but just channeling the energy of the elements. Oh, the air will take care of it. It'll just brush it off my skin. The earth will help absorb and ground. The water will help wash it away. Using those inner narratives, that's where I choose now to focus on, instead of doing the blame game. Now, oh, I have the responsibility of using the elements or whatever tools I have to clear that energy, and it becomes an active choice in the beginning until it becomes autonomic. Yeah, so there was a period when I definitely had to train myself to think a certain way, in a way that's more beneficial to my mental and emotional health, in a way that allows me to take responsibility as well for my emotions, even if it was triggered from somebody on the outside. I hope that answers the question a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh,
I want,
one more thought too on
yeah,
identity,
go.
which is huge, is we're constantly evolving, and what traps us in our old identity is really our own minds and also other people as well, how they see us. But there was just one point in my life when I decided, you know what, it can be a simple like switch. Like I'm not I can the next day I can be a complete different person if I choose to be. I just had to choose on how to show up a little bit differently, how to speak differently, and it may take some time because we're often conditioned into a certain identity. But when one is ready to break free from that identity, it's all internal. No one is holding us down.
Yeah.
It's all invisible. Like it's almost like fake. We can create something new. We can take off the invisible shackles that has trapped us in an old identity that's no longer serving who we're becoming.
Mhm.
It's an easy shift. It can take time because we are deeply ingrained in the way we are, especially as children. When we were sponges, we're taking things in, and by the time you're a young adult, it's locked in there. And that's actually where the value of psychedelics comes in, because it helps to break apart those neural pathways and allows things to reform, which is equally why it's important after a psychedelic journey to keep the mind clear of the old ways of thinking, to make sure that we're not inputting junk and garbage to wire back in. It's very mindful of our thoughts and how we think and how we feel. The books that we read, the types of communication we're having is important after a psychedelic journey because we're so moldable after. We're like sponges.
Yeah. I could talk to you forever and ever. I like there's so many things I want to say, not even about the psychedelic experience and journey. And I want to tell everyone about how well, you're coming to the cottage. We're going to do this together, and what I'm seeing in my community as well. But even I'm just going to speak off to the side for a second. As a woman, as a mother, as a business owner, as a quote unquote leader, culturally, we take the identity, the hat that we wear, the role that we play, and they're like, this is my identity. Right. So when people ask me to introduce myself at this point, I'm like, I'm a soul having a human experience. Like I can't say I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. Those are like roles I play, but that's not who I am. And it's how I show up to each role that makes an impact. And that is moldable. That is, I'm at the point where I'm like, I understand that I am the creator of my reality. And that too has privilege and responsibility. But you can see when you're met with someone what they're carrying mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And it is a choice. You do have choice. Yeah, I could go on about the things that I have unpacked and learned and healed in a rapid pace. I have just found this journey to be very supportive for me, especially in the profession that I have chosen and the life path. And the one group experience I did with you, I realized like you always see the teachers, the leaders, you're like, who do they attract? I noticed that you do attract a lot of entrepreneurial, professional, ambitious people. And that too was like, maybe I don't know why you do, maybe because you used to, I don't know. I'm curious if you know why, but what the vibe I got where these people are like, I got one life. I have a lot of responsibility. I have a big dream. I have a big vision. Like, how can I get there as quick as possible? And that to me has been the accelerator is I'm not talking about my problems. Let's move through them as quick as possible. Let's declutter. Yes, there is a healing. You have to slow down. You have to be patient. It's not like next, next, next. But it does feel, it scared the shit out of me, which I knew was a door I probably needed to go through because it was scary. And then once I went through the door, I was like, there's that saying, fear is an inch deep and a mile wide. That once I went in, I was like, I have wasted so much time and energy running away from this fear.
Mhm.
If I run towards it, I'm going to heal that much quicker. I'm going to create what I want and desire so much faster. So that was a little rant that I went on, but I don't know if there's anything that's coming up
Yeah,
for you that you want to say
I
based on that.
I agree. It's this experience. It's been a huge catalyst for people, and there's a lot of value in talk therapy and learning. If anything, the more tools you have mentally, it can support you in the integration process, in the ceremony itself. However, going into this type of experience, it's not like you don't use the mind. The mind will unravel. It's like emptying the cache file. It's getting deep into the emotional body. It can be physical. It can be energetic. It's going into a whole different way of healing that doesn't need you to do anything besides surrender to the experience. And actually, when I tell people to surrender, sometimes they don't know how to surrender. So now I say, just be with what is. That's it. Whatever is happening, just be with it. If the mind's unraveling and it feels like it's going crazy, or the body's having a strong physical reaction, just be with it. That's how you surrender. Um, and just allowing and trusting this wisdom of the earth, like this is coming from the earth to
Yeah.
do its job, to do its role. It's a reconnection back to nature as well. And it's just a huge catalyst that I don't think I could have done just talking it out, because there's just so much. If anything, the people who have gone through this experience, they can't remember anything, like a lot of it, because you just can't. There's just so much emptying that happens and processing mentally and emotionally in such, a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And then it's equally important to take periods of break just to allow things to settle as well. Allow the nervous system to settle. Allow your new way of being to just um, get ingrained. Um, I like ritual. Ritual's very important to me. Not in just what I do, in the physical, my gym, what I eat, but also how I think. Like, just gratitude is such a big one. Gratitude, compassion, and like blessings, counting the blessings in my life. That's ritualistic, because that ingrains in like what a privilege it is to wake up, to brush my teeth, to take care of my plants, to cook. What a privilege it is. So that's part of my ritual practices as well, which is great for integration post journey, because again, we're working with the new neural pathways forming.
Mhm.
And when we get into a state of gratitude and compassion, it releases serotonin and dopamine, the motivation to keep connecting with ourselves and others, and just the good feeling hormones. And yeah, I guess that's all I had to say with
Yeah.
that.
I want to piggy off of that, piggyback, and experiential. I do believe there can become like an addiction to learning in the sense of acquiring more information. And I tell people all the time, and usually people come to me when they're surrendered to that. They're like, I'm taking in, but it's not getting past the first layer. Like, I'm listening to the books, I'm listening to the podcasts, I've bought in the programs, but now I need to integrate in the sense of I need to do the thing. I need to sit and take the specific action. I need to finish the play. I need to
Yes.
go, do the whole
Mhm.
circle. And that too is what I love about this experience. It's experiential learning. It accelerates your growth. So Eddy, you're coming to a few of the cottage retreat
Mhm.
intensives. We've added this experience, and the way that you're coming to do the ceremony, I'll be co-creating with you, and I will be supporting everybody with the integration. And when I'm used to helping people manage their emotions and deal with the
Mhm.
stuff. Um, so you can go to, for those that are listening that are curious, you can go to Heather Chauvin, CHAUVIN.com/retreat. You just put your name, your email, there's more information. We have like a handful of spots left. And then you put down a deposit. We have a conversation to make sure it's aligned. So I always tell people if it's not aligned, we're not going to put you in that situation. And I'm very confident on who this will fit for, who it won't fit
Mhm.
for. We can connect you with Eddy if you need additional supports or questions. But what do you say to that person that's listening? And obviously, they don't need to experience it with you, but maybe they're like, this keeps coming up in my life. This is another, it just, psychedelics just keeps coming up, leaning in, the curiosities, maybe like someone where I was, um, where they're like, is this a tool that I need to lean into? What do you say to that
Mhm.
individual?
Never rush. When someone's in the excitement of it, um, just wait a little bit. Do the research as well. Um, and with doing research, you are going to hear a lot of stories of what people have gone through, but also to discard that after as well. Because each person is going to experience what they need for themselves. Um, just to never rush or feel pressured. Like there's a deep knowing we know it's right for us.
Yeah.
And it's that feeling could be different for everyone. It could be like just a gut knowing, or you know what, I'm in a time in my life where this just feels perfectly aligned. The last thing is just the pressure, pressure from yourself or a feeling of desperation as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if there's a feeling of desperation, perhaps start getting into some healthy practices, getting into some healthy rituals, mentally, emotionally, physically, meditation, a bit of breath work, walking, gym, just to prime and prepare yourself. And for those who do feel ready, you're going to get a workbook, which is going to give you a whole plethora of ways to mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually prepare for the journey so that you come in having the strongest foundation as possible. So that would be my tips. Yeah, just trusting yourself, doing some research, discarding other people's stories, so you
Mm-hmm.
come in with a clear slate, and just being well prepared if you do decide to do it. Yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah,
I
and
just want, before we wrap up, and you can let everyone know how they can also find you personally and what you got going on. Um, to touch on the desperation, because I've heard you talk about this previously, and I've
mhm,
seen people do this where I'm like, I don't think they're doing this for the right reasons.
mhm,
And I'm curious your relationship to that, or what you say to people when they're like, I'm going to do this thing, it's going to fix all my problems. Because I do think people become too codependent on a tool or a strategy to like, this is
mhm.
it, this is going to, yeah, I'll be back on track.
Yeah,
That has not been my experience with
yeah,
anything in life. It's like always one little thing leads to another. So, yeah,
mhm.
what do you say to people for that?
Yeah. It's not a silver bullet.
Mhm.
You have to co-create with it. You have to take responsibility as well. The medicine's going to meet you exactly where you're at. So if you're coming in desperate, um, the journey might not be as fruitful. And
Mhm.
I've seen in the past as well. But if you take the time to reflect, contemplate, do some of the inner work, maybe read a few good books on personal growth and evolution, and get yourself to a place of a little bit more groundedness, um, then you're going in with a stronger foundation.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because the medicine can really tear people down if you're already feeling extremely vulnerable. The integration process might be that much more challenging,
Yeah.
and you may have to get an integration coach or a therapist to really help you post journey, which could be challenging. I've seen that. So doing their work before is much more recommended. And also too, I call it sacred ceremony. Sacred comes from like sacrifice. Like, what are you willing to sacrifice to go into this ceremony? Because it does require you to clean up your diet, to clean up the thinking, to get really clear on what it is that you want to work on with yourself, to get honest with yourself, to get into the practices, to surround yourself around good people and community and good books and podcasts. So those are the prerequisites that I would recommend for anyone going in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't have to be perfect with your prerequisites either.
No, you don't have to be
Yeah.
perfect.
Because
But
people
just
are like,
the
what
effort.
if I don't do it? And
Yeah.
just
the effort.
Yeah. Intention. All right. So Eddy, thank you. Where can people find more of you? Where are you located? If they want a private ceremony, all the
So
things.
I'm located in Toronto, in the West End, and I work out of my personal ceremony space, which is both my home, personal ceremony space for 1 up to 11 people. And then, of course, I'll be doing the retreats with you at the cottage if somebody wants more of an immersive experience. And you can find me online at eddytony.com, EDDYTONY.com. And then my Instagram handle is also at Eddy Tony.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always tell people follow the breadcrumbs. And, for me, it wasn't like a deep knowing. It was like a curiosity. It was a neutral curiosity. And there wasn't a pull either way. But I was like, okay, let's be curious.
Yeah.
And I do think when you're not living in a crisis state and seeking like desperation, it's not a one and done. Everything is about a journey. And I do believe the medicine as well kind of forces you to not only slow down, but that patience. It brings you back to the groundedness of like, there's seasons, like the plants are going to bloom on their own time. The flowers are going to bloom on their own time. And nature does its thing. And we're the ones in such a hurry. So yes. Eddy, thank you.
Thank you.